everyone. Welcome to Perennia's 7th webinar of the Preparing for Retail Success series, provided to you by our AgriFood funding program. Today's topic will be, so now you're on the shelf, what now? My name is Emily Page, and I'm a food scientist with Perennia Food and Agriculture. We offer a wide array of services to support Nova Scotia's agriculture and seafood sectors, such as food safety, agricultural extension, mobile wine bottling, and analytical testing of cannabis foods and beverages. At the Perennia Food and Beverage Innovation Center, we work with clients on product development, process improvement, nutritional labeling, and shelf life determination. First, I would like to introduce our guest presenter today, Peter Chapman of SKUFood. Peter understands the food industry and he works hard to figure out where he's going. His experience includes both sides of the desk. Prior to working with suppliers and launching SKUFood, Peter worked for 19 years with Canada's largest food retailer, Blah. He is committed to using this experience to help producers and processors understand retailers and consumers. Peter is the author of A la Carte and has provided food industry insights to Canadian Grocer, Globe and Mail, Maclean's Magazine, and Canada AM. And lastly, just the Zoom housekeeping notes. If you have a question during the session, please use the Q&A button, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom window. And we will answer questions at any time and have also a Q&A session at the end. And with that, I'll pass it off to you, Peter.
Great, thanks very much, Emily. And great to see everybody here today for this topic, which I love the title. And when we were looking at all the different content that could be delivered during this series with Perennia, and this was actually, I believe it was a topic that Emily suggested, and I think it's a great one because it is so true. People put so much work and effort into sort of developing products and figuring how to produce them and get them into packaging and do all those steps. And then when they get them to the shelf, which is a huge accomplishment and one that everybody should always celebrate, it's sort of like, okay, what do I do now? And if you don't continue to do all the hard work, the problem is you might be looking for a new shelf somewhere. So today we're going to talk about all the different things that should be done to ensure that you generate success and ultimately stay on the shelf, which should be your goal. And I know getting to the shelf is a goal, and this whole thing is a journey, no doubt about that. But we really have to focus on doing the right things to stay on the shelf and continue to be successful in that environment. So we're going to talk about a number of different aspects that you need to do to be able to be successful and really stay on the shelf. And oftentimes when have the opportunity to work with different producers and processors, they say, they kind of have this thought that when they get to the shelf, it's like, oh, finally I'm there, I've accomplished this massive goal. Now I'm going to just make products and think about which island am I going to buy in the South Pacific and which tropical paradise am I going to spend all my time on and enjoy the beach and the sand and go for a swim in the water and all that kind of stuff. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it doesn't work that way. It really doesn't work. The fact that you can just kind of say, okay, I made it to the shelf. My focus is going to go back to producing things, delivering them, and then I'm going to just sort of count all my money. So, and we can't travel right now anyway. So I guess we'll just have to put that idea of that island in the South Pacific on hold for a little bit. And for me, that journey is a little bit more like trying to climb Everest than it is sort of doing all the hard work to make a product and then buy an island in the South Pacific. So if you think of, that sort of journey of success with your product, for me, all the hard work that you have to do to get the product ready, produced, developed, innovate, all those kind of things is really for me like getting to base camp. When you get on the shelf, when you get that listing with a retailer, with a customer, that for me is really like getting to base camp. And yes, there's been a huge amount of work you've had to do to get to that point, but that's not the ultimate goal. When you think about it, the ultimate goal is really staying on the shelf. And that's when you really kind of get to that summit of Everest. And if you've ever had to, I'm not sure that any of you have actually climbed Everest. I haven't myself, but I have watched speakers who have shared their story of all of the challenges that they go through to summit that mountain. And it really, for me, there are a lot of similarities, and it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of planning. And one of the things which I found interesting when I heard one person speaking about summiting Everest was just the amount of, it's not just you start at base camp and then you just go up the mountain. That's not how it works. They move in very well-planned stages where they'll go to a certain point on the mountain. Then they have to acclimatize. They have to get their body used to it. They have to bring all their supplies to that point. And then they really set up another camp. Obviously not as elaborate as the base camp, but another camp with everything. And they have to bring ladders to go across all these crevices and all these different pieces of equipment that are required. And then they'll move to the next stage. And it's a very well-planned, methodical process to allow them to get to that summit. And for me, I think staying on the shelf in our world in food and beverage is a little bit the same. You need a great plan. You need a lot of resources, a lot of different things you need to be able to stay on the shelf. And we're going to talk about those today. And the other part about this that often happens is it's a little bit like a dog chasing a car. We all see that, where we see a dog running after a car and you kind of go, okay, what are you going to do when you catch that thing? And so right now you see a picture, that's our dog, Stella. And Stella's actually a greyhound who was a retired, or is a retired racing dog from Florida. Stella raced for about 2.5 years in Florida. And when the greyhound puppies are born, they breed them and train them to race. They're always trained to be the lead. They race up and down. When in the farms where the puppies are born, they have runs, long straight runs, and they put a dog they know is faster beside them, and the puppies race to try to catch that one. And that breeding and that training is still evident in Stella today, because if you take her for a walk, always on a leash, if you take her for a walk, when a car goes by, she just has that instinct that she's got to get ahead of it. And often I say to her, okay, what are you going to do if you do catch that thing? And but probably with her, she just actually run right by it, because believe it or not, a greyhound will get up to their speed of over 70 kilometers an hour in 3 strides. So she can go pretty quick, and probably faster through a residential neighborhood than the cars are supposed to be going. So but getting that product on the shelf, it is a little bit about like the dog chasing the cars. So, okay, so what are you going to do now with it? And that's what we're going to talk about today, is the different things that you should do now. So the first thing we're going to go through is really how important it is to confirm those expectations, and how you can have those conversations with your customer and get on the same page with different facets of being a product that's available for sale in their stores. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the importance of creating a promotion plan. And yes, it's their store, but it's your job to sell your product in their store. So we need a plan. We're going to help you, give you some insights into how you can do that, different components of it. So we're going to talk about that. The third thing that is so important with having listings and being successful in the stores is you've got to get in there to see what's happening. That's where the consumer makes that decision to buy your product or perhaps not buy your product. So you need to get in there and see what's going on, need to understand the category. So lots of different things about the stores we're going to talk about today. Next thing is you need to communicate with your customers. And I know oftentimes we kind of go, oh, I'm finally get to the shelf. I don't have to deal with them that much anymore. No, you're just starting that journey of working with them. So communication is a big piece of it. And then the last piece is really evaluating those results and really understanding. So how are we doing? Did we overperform, underperform, about expectations? And we got to be objective about those things. We have to look at it. And there's lots of different things going on in the marketplace for sure, which you need to take into consideration. But the reality is you need to be objective about it. And we're going to talk about how you can evaluate some of those results. So one thing I wanted to do was just check in and see for the people we have on the call today, just curious as to how many of you would have a product that's listed with a retailer. So Emily put the poll up on the screen there. So yes, you have one listed, no, but we're really close to getting one listed, which would be, great timing for either one of those for our session today. or perhaps no, you're still working on something and it'll be some time. Or oftentimes we have a lot of people who support industry on our sessions as well. So I want to give you a chance to respond. So one thing I wanted to do was share a little bit of insight while while people are having a chance to participate in the poll. So we do have one of our great SKUFood profit wheels for, perhaps we'll go with the top 3 today, because I just have one question for you. So we'll go with the top 3. And this is a question that I get asked often, and I'll give you the answer after we give people a chance to vote in the chat, or put your answer in the chat. So the question I get asked often is, Peter, what about listing fees? How much does it cost me to get to the shelf? And there's no doubt that the reality in our industry is that oftentimes your retail customers will charge listing fees. They own the store, they own access to the shelf. So sometimes they will charge, or not sometimes, often, they will charge what we call listing fees. Now, if you're in sort of more the independent sort of specialty stores, a lot of times the term you'll hear is free fill. And free fill means they want 1 case per SKU per store, and that's the equivalent of the listing fee. So they're looking for that free initial order to go on the shelf, and then after that, you will get paid for your products. But if you're talking about a listing at one of the larger retailers, perhaps not a national listing, but perhaps a regional listing, what I'm looking for is, what do you think the dollars per store per SKU are that you would have to pay for your listing fees? So you can just put those in the chat, and Emily will keep an eye on that for us, and we'll send a profit wheel, and we'll do it like the Price is Right. So up to, but not over the right answer. So I'm just looking for how many dollars per store per SKU would you think that you would have to pay to get on the shelf in one of the major retailers. So I think people are probably starting to put some numbers into the chat. So I see $1,000 per SKU per store. Okay, there's one, and I'm not sure whether we're going to get some more guesses there. And so I do see Emily also put the results up for the poll, which is great. So we'll check those out while people are putting their guesses in. So do you have a product listed with a retailer? So more than half of you do, which is great. So that's awesome. And so I'm really, I think today, and then also we've got another almost 10%. So close to 70% of you either have a product listed or close. And then also we've got about 1 out of 4 people who support producers and processors. So that's great. So I think we've got a great audience for the kind of content that we're going to talk about today. So I see some more guesses coming in. So I see discount at NSLC. You guys are actually a little bit rich on some of your guesses here. So I'll let you keep putting some things in if anybody else has any. We're just, again, looking for that amount, the dollars per store per SKU that you would have to invest in listing fees. So we'll come back to that. And Emily, if you remind me as well to come back to that, then I'll make sure that I share what the right answer is as we keep going today. So you may have heard me say this before, but I'm going to continue saying it because for me, it's really important that people understand that success in our industry is not just about making great products to sell. It's about selling those great products you make. And what we're going to talk about today is a lot about just the importance of selling those great products you make. And no doubt there's so much work goes into making them and producing them and getting them into the package. And I'm not trying to diminish that amount of work, but I always want to remind you that we've got to put the focus and the effort into the selling part of it as well. And as you think about what you need within your business to be successful on the shelf, one of the big things you need to do is think about what are the resources that you need to allocate to that. And I'm taking you back to that tropical island with a little bit of a beach scene here because I know it's it might be cold outside and we can't go anywhere right now. So I'm just trying to warm you up with a little bit of that beach scene. But you really need to think about those right resources in your business. And that's in terms of sort of somebody who's got the capability to do this work. And dealing with these customers, you need a different mindset. You need to understand how to service them as a customer and what you provide, the type of information that they're looking for, how to communicate with them, that kind of thing. The person also needs the time available to do that. This cannot be the number 7 thing on their top 5 list of things to get done today. They really need to manage these customers. You need to be proactive. It's not just about waiting. A lot of different things. So make sure that you allocate the right resources. And depending on the size of your business, that might not be you. There's no doubt if you're an owner of an SME in food and beverage, you want to be involved in these customer relationships, but you don't always have to be the only person. So it's important to find the right resources. So let's go through the different things that we identified that will help you stay on the shelf and be successful. So the first thing is to make sure that you confirm expectations with your customers. And that's such a critical piece. We got to know the playing field that we're on. We need to understand, what are they thinking? What are they looking for? Because don't, just think that it's going to be the same as what you think it will be. So the most important metric, and trust me, this is how you will be judged in terms of your ability to stay on the shelf, grow your presence, perhaps get new listings, different opportunities, that kind of thing, is sales. Sales really do drive the retail part of the food industry. So that means you need to think about sales as well. And so when you get a listing, you need to be saying to the category manager, to your point of contact, what do we think that the either sales per store should be, the annual sales, whatever it is. Usually they think in terms of cases. That's usually their sort of mode of operating, is how many cases. So is it 1 case per store per week, 1 case per store per month, 500 cases per year, whatever it is? You need to make sure you know that expectation level that they're working from, because in your business, you might say, wow, 500 cases. Wow, that was a great month. But if they're looking for 650, they're going to be disappointed. And that's how you're going to be judged. So ask the question. It's 100% a fair question to ask. And I like to ask a question with giving them an answer at the same time. So what you might say is, our expectation was that we would do 100 cases per month. Is that similar to where you're at? And let them answer the question. They're going to tell you if they think that number should be 125 or that number should be 75. But the important thing is, you really need to know, where are they at on sales? And again, that's how you're going to be judged. So make sure you ask that question. What is our sales? What target are we looking for sales? The second thing you need to do is you really need to understand, what do they expect that you're going to spend on your product? And we have to remember that you've got to invest money to stay on the shelf in the food and beverage industry. Unfortunately, we've trained consumers to look for loyalty programs, to look for in-store specials, to look for flyers, to look for all the different ways that you can invest in these different, what we call trade spend. So make sure you understand, what are they thinking? And a lot of times they'll give you a percentage. They'll say, well, we expect to spend in the category to be 10%. So what that means is, if you sell them $1,000 worth of goods, they're expecting you're going to invest $100 back in trade spend. So you need to know that number. So that's 100% a fair question, because they're managing the category and they know what they expect. And if you're a smaller vendor that's in a category with some larger ones, well, it's just normal. The larger ones have more to spend because they have economies of scale and that kind of thing. But you just need to know, do they expect you to do, what's the percentage that they're looking for you to spend? And now, remember, these are negotiations too, right? So if they say, oh, we're looking for a trade spend of 20%, and you go, whoa, that's a little steep in my world, then what you need to do is come back and say, well, our expectation was probably more like 15, and here are some of the things we're planning on doing. And make sure they go, okay, 15 is reasonable. Because if, again, they're thinking of 20 and you come up short, they're going to feel like it didn't work. So make sure you have the conversation. Another thing with regard to trade spend, what is the frequency of the promo? So this is a rollback, which is like an in-store special at Walmart. So how often do they expect you to do that? 4 times a year? Do they expect you to do it 1 time a year? Do they expect you, if you're in Sobeys, do you do air miles 4 times a year? If you're at Loblaw, is it PC optimum points? What is the frequency of the promo? And remember, as a merchant, as a merchandiser, they're managing the entire category. So they're looking and they're saying, all right, we need X amount of weeks with loyalty in our category. So I'm showing you the condiment category. So if you happen to be in that category, the category manager's probably got a plan that says we need to have 12 out of 52 weeks where we have a loyalty offer, or we need to have 20 out of 52 weeks with a loyalty offer. So that's what they're going to go and try to negotiate with their vendors. So you need to know, what is that expectation for frequency of promo? Very important, how often they expect you to be coming to the table. Service level. We all know what happened to us in 2020, where we had empty shelves and service level became such a more important priority for everybody in the food and beverage industry. So ask the question, what do you expect for service level? Most of them are going to tell you they want to see it north of 95%. And just so we're all clear, you need to know the definition of service level too. So service level is cases delivered divided by cases ordered, not cases delivered over 3 weeks because we ran out of packaging, or our cardboard box supplier shorted us so we couldn't. No, it's cases delivered divided by cases ordered. And you need to know what their expectation is for service level, because that probably right now in our industry is going to be such an important way that they're going to judge the performance of your business. And again, that's how you stay on the shelf. They're making that decision. So you need to know that you gotta perform. And don't assume, please ask the questions. That's what these people are, that's part of their role, is to make sure that they are, sharing what they can. They can't tell you everything, but they do want, ultimately they want suppliers to sell product. I mean, that's how their store works. So you want to ask these questions, and don't assume that because you think 500 cases a year is a good sales number, that's what they're going to think. So ask the questions. Again, I like to give them a number and say, we're expecting 500. Is that where you're at? That kind of thing. But make sure that you get and write them down, because at the end of the year, when they're looking and they're going, they may come back to you and say, we only did, sales were a little disappointing. And you say, well, we did 510. And when we talked, you told me 500 was the target. Oh yeah, right. 500 was the target. I thought maybe it was 750. So you got to make sure that you get that and you're able to have that conversation with them. So the next thing that's so important is that you have a promotion plan. It's, again, your job to make sure that these products get off the shelf and sell. So it's really important that you have that plan to be able to sell your products. And I do see we have a question in there, and I believe Emily mentioned off the top that we certainly are encouraging your questions, and I will take a break. Maybe we'll take a break partway through and address some of the questions. So if you do have any questions, by all means, put them in that Q&A space, and we will definitely address them for you. So let's talk about promotion. And one of the reasons that for me it's so important is numbers like this, where Nielsen would tell us 36% of sales and 48% of tonnage going through the front end are with a temporary price reduction. So that means almost 1 out of 2 units going through the cash register has some form of either discount, loyalty program, something attached to it that generated something for the consumer to see. So really want to make sure that we're focused on that, and that's part of your plan. And whether you like it or not, we've trained consumers to look for this in food and beverage. So we have to be there. It doesn't mean you need to slash your prices. It doesn't mean that you need to be there all the time. But if the other players in your category are on discount, say 12 weeks of the year, and you're not, then that's going to be a challenge for you, because consumers get drawn to those signs. They look at the category and they go, oh, that one's on sale, or that one has air miles or points or whatever it is. So it's important to have that promotion plan. So let's talk about some of the terms and always want to make sure that I'm explaining the right terms to people. So trade spend. So trade spend is defined as the money that you spend with, if I was still at Loblaw, I'd probably tell you the word I would use would be invest, but the number is the dollars that you spend with your customers. So the money that you spend with Sobeys or Loblaw or Walmart or whatever retail you happen to be in. So that could be listing fees. So we talked about that up front, and I didn't see any more numbers in the chat. So I will tell you, you're actually a little high, most of you. If I was planning on we'll say a regional listing with one of the major retailers, I would say that you probably, and this is in the food side, and I see we have one with NSLC, which would be a different answer to that. But really in food and beverage, with a major retailer, with a SME looking for a listing, I would say you probably need to budget between $75 and $100 per store per SKU. That should be enough to pay those listing fees. And again, they're always negotiable. So if you're paying listing fees, I always want to try to say, okay, well, we're going to do the listing fee, but can you give us this? Can you maybe give us an extra O&A display? Or can you do this? Can you do that? You know, you can always try to get a little more. Don't tell Sobeys and Loblaw, as I said that. So another thing in trade spend is ads. So if you're in the flyer and you discount your selling price to the retailer, that's money that you've spent with the retailer. If your regular selling price is $40 a case and you do it for $35 for the ad, well, that $5 would be counted as trade spend. Also demos, whenever we can get back to doing in-store demos again, that would be another example, because most often you have to do that through the retailer. They have programs set up where you register and it's their people and that kind of thing. So that would be another trade spend. In-store specials, loyalty program. There's lots of examples where the retailers have opportunities for you to invest with them. I also put trade shows here. So if it's an industry trade show and you're making that investment, and it's not a consumer show, but an industry where you're going to see category managers or distributors or that kind of thing, that's also part of your trade spend. So you want to make sure you understand how much are you prepared to spend with your retail customers. And then the second part of your promotion plan is all about the marketing spend. So how much are you going to spend directly on consumers? So that would be things like social media, mass media, public relations, even your packaging design. That's something that you're really doing to communicate directly with consumers. So that's something. And then also we do lots of consumer shows sometimes. If you're in Atlantic Canada, you might participate in, whenever we get back to having these things again, where we have something like Saltscape show. That would be a consumer show where you're spending some of your marketing spend. So you want to think about your plan in terms of, what am I going to put into trade spend and what am I going to put into marketing spend? And what I always encourage people to do, build a 12-month plan. You can't do this sort of at the last minute. Your retail customers are working months and months out. So if you want to participate in some of their programs, then you need to make sure that you're planning this 12 months out. So I just take a simple spreadsheet, put the months across the top, put all the different things that you could participate in for that trade spend and marketing spend. So you see I've listed a bunch of them here. On the left-hand column, there's different ideas, and you may have some of your own that you have that aren't on my list, but that's fine. It's really all about capturing and planning. And you don't want to have everything bunched into one quarter. You want to have it spread out through the year so your customer sees that you're investing in driving sales. You want to think about seasonality. Some products have a lot of seasonality. Some products, they're more even throughout the year. You want to look at the category. When did your competition? Maybe last year they did a huge thing on a certain weekend or something like that. So do you want to try to plan something for that weekend, or do you want to stay away from that weekend, let them have it, and you come in maybe 2 weeks before and try to get people to pantry load a little bit so they don't buy as much of the other one? There's all kinds of different strategies you can use, but the key is you got to make sure that you're working on these promotion plans and that you pencil out the year. Don't do it in pen because it can change, but you want to really pencil it out. And then the next thing you want to do is figure out the cost. So understand, what are the costs of the different programs that you want to do, and does it work with the math that you have sort of allocated for this part of your business, because you can't spend too much. That doesn't make any sense. You got to generate a return. You got to have some profit left, but you've also got to participate in these programs. You've got to be doing the work to sell your product off the shelf. And one thing I'd always encourage people to do, especially as you're growing your business, is you want to look at testing what works, what doesn't work, what's more effective than another thing. And if you happen to sell on Amazon, the term that they use, and I think it's a great term because it's simple, it's just A/B testing. They say do promotion A, do promotion B, look at the results and figure out what was better. So if you look at the picture I'm showing you there, so that's dairy isle cheese from ADL. So one week they ran a buy one, get one free ad with Sobeys. So hopefully they looked at their volume and said, what did we do? What did we invest to get to that? And what were the results? And then the second photo is just of having some off-shelf merchandising, and sometimes you have to do a little bit of an in-store special to get that, but it's obviously much less of a discount than the buy one get one free. So one of the you want to do that A/B testing. What were the results from promotion A, which is a buy one get one free with probably a bigger investment, versus the results of promotion B, which was an in-store special with some off-shelf merchandising tied into it. And one thing I want to point out, and one of the reasons I took the picture on the right, is look at the brand switching happening there. And that's something you can get excited about if that's your brand, because you go, wow, somebody had Black Diamond slices, Compliments cheese, Black Diamond cheese block in their hand or in their shopping cart, and then they put it back and obviously bought the other one. And although the stores don't like that because they got to put that back on the shelf, that is a win for the dairy isle cheese, because obviously whatever the offer, whatever the value proposition was, the consumer went, wow, I'm going to pick that one up. So just always little hints you can see. And that's why I tell you, go to the stores. So for me, you've got to have probably 40 to 50% of your selling price to the retailer needs to be something you can invest in trade spend and marketing spend. And if you don't, you're going to be looking for a new shelf, because you won't have the ability, you won't have the staying power to do the things within the category that you need to do. So I think we've got a few questions. Do you want to take a quick break, Emily, and have a look at some of those questions before I move on to the next section?
Sure. So the first question here is the 12-month plan something that you come to the table with or work with the store to make it?
Yeah, and that's a great question. My suggestion would always be bring it to the table. That you have to be the sales and marketing manager for your products. You should know best. When do they sell? When is the best time to do the different things you want to do? And you won't always get everything you want. That's part of the reality of the situation. Somebody else might be trying to do something the same week or whatever it is, but bring it to the table. And it also, the retailer says, wow, I'm going to build some confidence because this supplier is ready to go. They're doing what they need to do. So I'm always a fan of bringing it to the table with the understanding that you kind of got to get it approved, especially the trade spend part of it from them.
Thanks. And then the second question we'll answer here before moving on is, what are the expected typical turnaround times from order to delivery of the bigger retailers?
Turnaround times from order to delivery.
The expected.
Right. So if I'm understanding the question right, and if I'm not, then just put another note in the Q&A or whatever. But you always, when you get your product listed, you always can tell you can tell the retailer what the time is from when they issue you a purchase order to when you deliver it at the warehouse. So they would count that as what they call lead time. So you can say to them, the order lead time needs to be 10 days. So that means that they need to order 10 days out from when the product would get delivered. And that's different for every item. Some products have really short lead times, other ones have longer, but that's something that you can work out with the retailer when you get your product listed. So, and if that's not what you were referring to in your question, then just put another note in and we'll address that one too. So, all right. So the next point is so you're on the shelf, what now, is visit the stores. And I appreciate right now, it's a little bit tougher to do some of these things because of some of the constraints that we're all under. But the reality is, if you want to stay on the shelf and be successful, you need to know what's going on in the store. So talk to the staff. The staff in the store are such a wealth of information, and they're not a category manager, so they're not going to negotiate with you. They'll probably tell you the way it is. And when you talk to the staff and say, oh, what about this product? Or a lot of times if you introduce them, they love to give you their input, their opinion, because not everybody asks them for their opinion. So if you introduce a new packaging format, or perhaps you had your item you invested in a trade spend opportunity like loyalty or something, and you can say, hey, did you notice how it worked or whatever? Because they're usually very close to things. So talk to the staff. Another thing I would always encourage you, especially if you have a new listing and it's a product that maybe people aren't as familiar with, offer to do something. The department managers have a meeting every week. And again, I understand there's a lot of constraints right now, but hopefully we'll be through some of that and we can get back to doing more of these things. But offer to feed them lunch. And it's a great way, you can say, look, I'll do the lunch thing for you. Maybe just give me a couple minutes to explain a bit about my product. And they go, oh, wow, that's awesome. So talk to the staff. The staff are a very valuable resource that we don't often spend enough time with. You've got to check the execution. So when you have invested in whatever it is, if it's display, off-shelf display, or maybe you did a shipper, which is going to go in and out, you've got to go out and see what's going on. So if you look at, I'm back to the dairy isle cheese because I had some photos of it. So if this is your buy one, get one free week and you've invested, well, you can see they're out of stock on 3 SKUs there, or 2 SKUs. So we're going to look and say, well, our target was 1,000 cases, but we only did 800. Well, that's because we were out of stock. So that means either the automatic reordering is not working, the staff didn't order enough product for the promo, something broke down somewhere. We didn't service the consumer the way we wanted to. So the only way you know these things is when you're out in the stores. And sometimes you can't be everywhere, and I get that. So sometimes you might have to enlist the help of a broker or something like that who has that retail coverage that can tell you what's going on out there. But you really do need to know what's happening in the stores. And this is a quote that I will always remember. When I was at Loblaw Companies, Richard Curry was the president of Loblaw Companies for many years while I was there. And not that I was in every meeting with him or anything like that, but this is one of the things which he said in meetings that I was attending. And he would look at us and he would say, look, you got to remember that the grocery industry is 5% strategy and 95% execution. And he was so right. I mean, we can sit around in the boardroom and the whiteboard and all that, and you have to do that. You have to plan. You need to have a plan to be successful, but you need to know what's going on in the store. That's where it's so important. So make sure you get a chance to get out and see what's going on. Look at that category activity. Look at perhaps your competitor's got a new promo and it's maybe a multi-buy and you go, wow, look at the people buying that at 2 for $7. I never thought they'd pay that. 2 for $7 is flying off the shelf like crazy. And last week we did an ad for $3.49 and it hardly moved, but 2 for $7 is the same price, but people think it's a deal. So you really need to learn about your category. And the only way you can do that is when you go out and see what's going on in the stores. And again, talk to those people working in the stores, because again, there's such a vast amount of knowledge for you. So we've talked about confirming expectations. We built that great promotion plan and you're executing it. You're going out to the stores to see what's happening. Now we need to make sure we're communicating. And I think I said earlier, sometimes we go, oh, we got it listed. Oh, I don't have to deal with them anymore. No, you have to deal with them still. And don't think you're being a pain, because sometimes you go, oh, I don't want to bug them or whatever. That's not the case. They may not answer every email or phone call that you share with them. But the point is, you always want to have that open line of communication. Know your place. I mean, if you're a vendor that's got $100 million in sales with a retailer, well, you're going to communicate more often because it's just a bigger part of their business. If you're a vendor that's got, say, $100,000 worth of volume with a retailer, well, you're not going to talk to them all the time, but you need to communicate, and what I call regularly. Find the right amount of communication to make sure that you develop that great relationship. And if you think about it, when you're driving in your car and you see these speed limit signs, I bet you almost everybody going down that road knows that it's a 50-kilometer zone. I mean, you're in a residential neighborhood, you probably know it's 50 kilometers an hour. remember back to my Greyhound Stella, she could run faster than that, but you should be driving 50 kilometers an hour. But we put these signs up to remind people. And what happens when we see that sign? We go, oh, I better slow down, or your foot comes off the gas a little bit, whatever it is. But it's a reminder about the speed limit, which you already know about. But we put that up as a reminder. So when you're thinking about your communication plan with your customers, and I encourage people to have a plan, then a lot of times it's just a reminder. They're managing hundreds, thousands of SKUs, thousands of vendors. So the odd time you send them a note and stuff, that's like, oh yeah, right, I remember that vendor, whatever it is. So think about that it's an important reminder for them sometimes. So sales. I told you up front that sales are going to be how you're judged. So if you get a listing with a retailer and you're on the shelf, every quarter you might want to update them on your sales. They're not looking at the sales on your SKU all the time. I hate to break it to you. So you might want to say, you know what, our target for the first quarter was 250 cases. Just want to let you know we came in at 260. That's it. Don't expect an answer, but it's just like that sign about the speed limit, right? It's like, oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, we had that conversation. Yeah, oh good. Okay, good. Next. And they move on. So you want to, not all the time, don't inundate them every week and whatever, but talk to them regularly about the communication, maybe once a quarter, maybe every 6 months, whatever it is, and just let them know. Next thing is service level. I told you how important it is. Make sure you're doing the calculation properly. They can check in their system what your service level is. But here's the thing about service level. They focus where the problems are. They don't look, I mean, they do look, they get reports, they look and they go, okay, yeah, 95, 95, 95. Oh my word, so-and-so's 40. Oh, I got to deal with that. That's a problem. We're going to be out of stock, whatever it is. That's where they go to. So if you're consistently at that 95% level that they asked you to do, then when you give them that quarterly update, you say, hey, we had targeted 250 cases in sales. We did 260. You asked us to be at 95% service level. We're at 95.7. That's all you need to tell them. But it's important to make sure that you're on their radar screen. And then the second thing is, another thing is opportunities. So if you have opportunities, then make sure you're communicating them to them. Don't think they're going to come to you with all the ideas, because that's not their role. Their role is to run great stores, drive traffic in the store, get people going by your product with a shopping cart, and then it's your job to get that customer to go, hey, I need that. So if you have a great idea that says, you know what, if you buy a bag of chips and we're going to give you a salsa for $2 off, then you got to put that in front of them and you got to keep trying. And sometimes you don't always get it. I remember talking about this subject one time, and the analogy I used was a pole vaulter, right? If you don't get over the bar, you pick up your pole, you go back to the end of the runway and you come running down again and you try again. So you don't always get it, but you got to put those opportunities in front of them. You got to communicate to them. And then the last part for me on communication is you need to tell them what's going on with execution. So if you don't know what that is, that's a planogram. So almost every retailer planograms their shelves. They decide what items are going to go where. It's a complicated process where they look at sales and they look at margin and they determine what's going to go where. Well, it's critical for you to be in that planogram. So when they tell you the new planogram is going to be launched on April 15th, then that means that's going to the stores and the stores need to execute getting the planogram updated. So that's when your product, if it's a new listing, that's when your product should be in the stores and on the shelf. So you got to go out and check what happened. Did the planogram get executed? No. So again, you can't call them up and berate them about it. But if you're going to be held accountable for sales, then you got to make sure that you're saying to them, I just want to let you know, we had a bunch of people out in the stores because we were going to celebrate getting on the shelf. And we couldn't find it in the planogram because it wasn't updated in store or whatever. And again, you don't want to berate them. They got a lot to do. Updating the condiment section might have got pushed aside for that week because they had a different issue to deal with. And trust me, in the stores right now, there are a lot of challenges. It's very difficult to run a store right now with some of the constraints that we have in place, and obviously in place for a good reason, but it's not easy running stores and updating planograms and those kind of things. So you have to cut them a little slack. But again, you paid, if you paid listing fees, and you paid for that service. So you need to be able to say, when do you think it's going to get executed, because we're ramping up with inventory and we need to make sure that we're going to be ready to go for you so that neither one of us misses any sales. So you really want to check execution on a planogram. You want to check execution on in-stock position. All those things are so important to you meeting those targets. So communicate with them, find the right schedule, and don't think you're bothering them. They'll tell you if you're bothering them. So our last thing is about evaluating these results objectively. And I've put the word in objectively because sometimes our version of it is maybe different than the customer's version. And if you subscribe to that adage, if you ever go to Stu Leonard's store where he's got that great big massive granite rock and it's carved into the rock that says the customer is always right. I think it says rules to live by or something. And it says, number one, the customer is always right. Number two, if you don't believe the customer is right, see rule number one or something like that. So you need to know what the customer's expectation is and evaluate things objectively. So I'm back to sales again. It's so important that you look and say, how did we perform? If there's a reason that you didn't perform to the level that you and your customer had set, then you can talk about that. You know, if something happens, say your competition did 4 buy one, get one free during the year. Well, that's kind of crazy investing. So is it really realistic that you're going to get to your sales target? Or perhaps there was an issue with execution. You didn't get on the shelf until a month later or something like that. So, but make sure you evaluate those sales and create a sales culture within your business. Retailers are sales culture driven. Every week they're looking at their numbers. They're looking at what happened. How do we compare to last year? First number every retailer reports when you look at their financial reports, year over year sales increase, comparable store sales increase. So make sure you create that sales culture within your business. Are our sales up? Are our sales down? And if they're down, what's going on? How do we fix it? Promotions. Did it work? You always need to have a target. I talked to you about the A/B testing, which one worked better, but you also need to say, you know what, if we're going to do a multi-buy on our item, if we're going to go 2 for $6, we expect we're going to get a 20% lift or 30%, whatever it is. Evaluate the results. Did it work? Did you have the inventory in place? And if not, what do you have to do to fix it? Because those are the kind of things when you go back and talk to the retailer, you go, you know what? We had planned for 250 cases on the multi-buy. We only got 200, but we did have an issue with in stock or whatever it was. So, you know, but they want to know that that's what they appreciate that you're doing because you're trying to build the business. Next thing you need to do is evaluate those consumer reviews. It's so important. And in today's day, if you're selling products, especially on e-commerce, so many great opportunities for you to get consumer reviews and information about how your product is performing. We may not like them all. I get that, but it's what the consumer perceives. So we need to look at it. And if there's problems, so say you see a bunch of reviews where people are giving you 2 stars and they're going, I can't get the package open. It's too difficult to open the package. Well, then you need to address that because you're going to lose people because of that. And so that's, again, where I say objectively, you may think the package works fine, but if the consumers are consistently telling you something's wrong, then you need to take a look at it within your business. You need to look at the feedback that you're getting. What are the customers telling you? And you may not always like what they tell you. They may say, like, we don't like the way that package works, or we're getting a lot of feedback that we're getting broken bottles or whatever it is, but you got to listen to what they're telling you and listen to the feedback from the store and listen to the feedback from the merchants, because again, they make the decision. So you have to factor it into what's going on in your business. And it all comes down a lot of times to evaluating that customer relationship. So how is your relationship with your retailers? And if it's not good, you need to do some things to fix it, because then they'll say, you know what, we're not going to keep you on the shelf because either, you know, it's not working or whatever reason, our consumers are not happy with the product, whatever it is. So you need to always be evaluating that customer relationship and do things to test it. You know, if you send them 10 emails and you never get a response back, well, then there may be a little issue with the relationship. If you send them 5 and no response, and then you send them 2 and you get a response, well, then you go, okay, we're on the radar with them. So just test things all the time, evaluate how that relationship is going. And I just wanted to mention Next week, I know Daryl Monroe is going to give you a sort of a great summary and some great content about branding strategy at product launch. So that's such a great topic because there are so many things to do to get your product kicked off properly. And it's really important from everybody's perspective. And again, you want to build confidence with your retail customers. So when you're launching a product, they want to see that you're doing all the right things. So really encourage you to participate in next week's session. And just to kind of recap a little bit, the things from my perspective, the top 5 things that you really need to do as you're as you get on the shelf, and that sort of you're saying to yourself, okay, what now? So the first thing, which is not in the top 5, but is really important, is make sure you have the right resources allocated to it. Make sure that you've got those resources in place who can manage the customer, manage the orders, check out what's going on in the stores, do the promotion plan, all those things. So make sure you got the resources in place. So then the 5 things we talked about were, first of all, make sure you confirm expectations. Make sure you and your customer are on the same page with what should happen. The next thing was to put together that 12-month promo plan so that you've got a plan as to what you're going to do. Talk about it with the retailer. Make sure then it gets implemented and executed. So important. Third thing, visit the stores whenever you can. See what's going on in the total store, in your category. Lots of things you can learn from when you're out there. Next thing is communicate. Make sure you don't fall off the radar with your customers. Make sure that you're a part of the category, that your place in the category, but that you're a part of the category. And then the last thing, continuously in your business, evaluate the results, evaluate the relationship, see what's going on. And that's really what it is about managing the customer as well. So those are the things for me that will help you now that you've got on the shelf, that'll help you be successful, stay on the shelf, and grow your business within that retail environment. And lastly, Emily, I'm going to let you talk about the Minister of Agriculture series and some of the exciting things that are happening right now with that program.
Thanks, Peter. So this slide here up on your screen now is our Minister of Agriculture digital series. So this is the usual annual event. That's a conference in person, but we've switched to virtual. Only 1 session's happened so far, so still 4 more titles here on the screen. And actually the third one there, Consumer Trends in Agriculture, will be Peter and I again, but we're gonna flip seats a little bit and he's gonna take the lead and I'm gonna present. So be sure to check them out on our website and we will, there's more information online and the presenters and stuff like that.
Yeah, really looking forward to the session on the 31st. We've got some great panelists, and as Emily said, I'm going to be the moderator, and we're going to learn from Emily and some other great panelists. I was talking to Troy from Eden Valley the other day, and he is wound up about all the stuff he's going to talk about. I think we only have 90 minutes that day. I think Troy could fill about 89 of them, so I'm going to have to rein him in a bit, but he's got some great insights as to some of the things going on from their perspective. So really looking forward to that session on the 31st.
Me too. So we do have some time for questions. So please, if you have any, use the Q&A button at the bottom of your window and we'll be going through there. So the first question here, Peter, which you may have some insight on from your experience at Loblaw, is we have some GAP certified producers who go through the detailed listing process, wondering what's the purpose to go through it if some others get through the back door without it and are still on the shelf? And also, why would a store take on that liability?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. And I think I would always want, the retailers they have somewhat of a responsibility to be treating people with an equal playing field. And I think anytime somebody's going to be doing work in a category or whatever, you want to understand what are the retailers' expectations to get on the shelf in that category. And if they tell you that you need to be Canada GAP certified, and then you go to the store and you see something that isn't, then I think it's a question that needs to be asked and say, I don't understand. You told me to go through the process, and there's an expense, there's a cost, an investment to go through these different types of certifications. So why would they be on the shelf and not me? And even if it's 1 or 2 stores, I think it's still a fair question to ask because the retailers are doing it for a reason, and I think that they're doing it to protect the consumer. They're doing it to protect their own sort of image in the market. So they've asked you to do it. So I think it's a fair question to say to them, hey, why am I seeing that in the store?
I agree with that. Gap is not a quick or easy thing to do, and it is worth doing. But yeah, it's not fair if other people are getting in without that.
That's right.
So the other question here is there a different listing fee price based on the more favorable locations, such as at eye level?
There are for the bigger vendors, and if you're Kraft Heinz versus McCain or something like that, then yes, there's going to be some premiums for that, but not in the sort of the SME world. I would say the retailers really just kind of have a target that they're trying to hit in their mind for listing fees, and that's probably what they're going to go with. So I don't really see that there's a sort of a premium in the SME world. If you're trying to outbid one of the big players, then sure, they might try to negotiate with you a little bit for the more premium spot. It's actually most of the decisions within a planogram are made more about what is the right product to put in the best place that's going to generate the best, what they would call cents per unit profit. So and that's what they look at is sales and margin, and trying to figure out based on the sales estimate for a product, how much margins are going to deliver. And if you think of it, it's kind of like in an apartment building where everybody's paying rent for different apartments, and they're going to take the one that's going to deliver the best is going to get the best spot.
That's a good analogy.
And the other thing is, if you can't pay your rent because you're not delivering sales or margin, then they'll probably find another tenant to replace you. As much as I don't want to end things on a downer, but that's kind of the reality of it.
Well, there's no other questions at this time. We still do have a few minutes, so if you have a question, yeah, put it in now and we'll still get to it. Mm-hmm. But this was the 7th of 8 sessions today, which is crazy. The 8th is next week, and that's with Daryl Monroe on branding strategy at product launch. So Daryl's first session was branding strategy pre-product development. So if you want to catch up on that, the YouTube link is in the chat to all of our recordings. We've recorded all of the sessions and they're on YouTube. And then I did also put the registration link for next week in the chat. And I'm just looking here, and we didn't get any other questions. So I guess we get to sneak off a couple minutes early today, Peter. Thank you everybody for coming today, and really enjoyed this session, and I hope everyone else did as well.
All right, thanks very much, Emily.